Yeah.
Thank you very much, Heather Dubrow.
Thank you, Terry Dubrow.
The transition from Terry's face to the moon.
Yeah, just an iris in on Terry's face that dissolves into the moon. What? Who cooked up that? That was really funny.
I love that. I kept going back and replaying because it was so funny to me because it was just
so
like,
funny.
you know.
It was very old Hollywood, and it felt like the editors, I don't know if they were calling out the fact that his like post-surgery face is very like Man in the Moon, or if it was like, I don't know, it was the blend of all of it was just, it was just visually funny. It was like conceptually funny. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know if it made me think of old Hollywood, but it made me think of Aliens, where Cameron throws in a bizarre like crossfade between Sigourney Weaver's sleeping head and like the Earth.
Hello and welcome to the Bravo Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Midwinter. We're back after a bit of a hiatus, and we are pleased to be joined by the host of the Real House Guest of North Hollywood, Carson Frae.
I might be a Real House guest, but I won't sleep on your drama.
Whoa, nice. That's great. So Dylan, I teased a little bit about why I'm recording this a little bit differently. So hopefully this works out, but we've got a new co-host that is going to be joining us. It is
Betrayal.
Did that come through?
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's my soundboard. I got a soundboard.
Oh, nice.
I am going to be so annoying with this thing.
This is going to be amazing, and we're going to lose so many listeners to it. People are going to hate this, and I'm here for it.
I love it.
So we're going to, since we were on break, we have missed a few episodes of Real Housewives of Orange County, but I want to talk about the last two. So we're going to start with season 18, episode 8, which was the Traitors episode. Carson, if you want to lead us off with a little bit of a brief summary of what happened in that episode.
Tensions rise and rain falls in the OC. Some women get vulnerable. Some take a step back. The women come together playing a game of traitors.
Nice. I love it. Yeah, this I'm a fan of the Traitors, so it was awesome to see this. There's a lot that I liked about this episode. Curious about the presentation, because this one really had a unique structure, something that we don't often see. Do you want to get us started with a bit of an analysis on the presentation of this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was taken in by just like the weather of the episode. It was dark. It was like Scottish music. It gave me like very Macbeth vibes in a way, like something bad is coming, and it kind of felt like the tension was like leading. But the early scenes before it, that's when we saw a lot of like Tamra and her daughter, and then Katie and her daughter. It gave me a lot of like boyhood, like boyhood, ladybird, like mother daughter coming together identity, which I really like was like, oh, they're just exploring abandonment and like different, and that in the Orange County. But yeah, I really, really did love like the whole Traitors party, like the darkness of it. And it kind of felt like there was like a lot of like visual progression throughout the time of like the tension rising.
Yeah, totally. This episode almost feels like we're covering 3 episodes this week, because this episode felt like 2 episodes. Dylan, I'm curious what your thoughts were on this. Did you pick up on kind of 2 distinct chapters in this episode?
Yeah, I mean, definitely when they enter the traitor setting, it totally changes. And a good call, Carson, on that. When we start to have like the rain coming a little bit at first, and then more and more, it definitely just kind of seems to signal a shift, like an aesthetic shift, and just like a shift in tone. I love how it just gets more and more chaotic as they go deeper into this game and they go deeper into the night, and people don't quite understand the rules, and everything is just getting strange and unhinged. And there's a lot of bizarre imagery, reaching into their like Betty Gesserit box and like having Emily pull out a bunch of crickets like the hobo at the start of Hellraiser, and Tamra getting pushed into the pool and then being just ET for the rest of the episode. It just starts getting like very unhinged and visually chaotic, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it really leans into that chaos too. Like we got that very like quick rapid fire in memoriam segment that they like toss in there for the Tres Amigas. I just loved how this devolved into chaos. I was like, it was interesting that they chose the Traitors format for this like game show. I think that structure added a lot to the drama. But I also appreciated that they weren't so committed to adhering to that presentation for the gameplay. Like it just leaned into the chaos. It let it like flow organically, and they picked and chose the elements of the structure that they wanted, and they still let the story speak for itself. I just thought that they did actually a really good job of picking and choosing what would be effective. And yeah, Carson, like you mentioned, the weather, the way that the weather and the atmosphere that we see through this episode, the way it plays out is amazing, because we see kind of a more lighthearted beginning where everything is sunny. We're like practicing yoga outside. We've got like spray tans happening outside in the backyard, and then as the storm builds, we have that crescendo during the Traitors gameplay. And I thought it was funny, and I thought that there was actually an interesting duality there, because we did have a lot of really kind of deep emotional, like there was a lot of emotional depth and like darkness underneath all the sunny scenes that we got in the beginning. Like we're seeing Katie and Jen talking about their like divorce, and we're seeing that with like Tamra and her daughter, and talking about like that severed parental tie, and that's all kind of the darkness that's beneath that, like all those sunny scenes. And we got that scene with Emily and Shane where, you know, Emily is revealing her insecurities about like being called mean and whether or not she's a good mother, and her relationship with her mother. And then we got the Traitors, which is under darkness, and like it's presented in this dark and stormy way, and it's got a dark and stormy like tone in terms of like the way that the fights are taking place, but ultimately it is this like playful like playground. They know that they're playing like this game that isn't real. There's like, they're also playing the housewife game, which is like fairly meta and, you know, not the same sort of real stakes as they have in, you know, their relationships with their marriage and their children and stuff like that. So I really liked that duality a lot.
I think OC too, if you look at kind of both the episodes we're talking about, like they all kind of always deal with duality. I feel like that's like this overlapping theme. Like, you know, Jen, you know, comes off wealthy, but she's not. You know, and we see like later in the next episode with like Heather and Shannon, you know, she's a mess and Heather's very uptight and rigid and has it together. And I think that's like a constant theme throughout OC is like duality, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's interesting. We talked a lot actually about how the environment like or the geography of a place really impacts these shows in a really profound way. And Dylan, you've brought up the fact that in the OC, everyone has all this space, but they've really like guarded it up. They're all behind like huge fences and gated communities, and how they present outwardly is very distanced from how they are internally. Whereas something like New York, what you see is what you get. And, you know, the impact of being so in such a densely populated environment and having to muscle for your space and not having the room to put up this guard, it impacts the personalities that we see on screen. So yeah, it's I think it's really interesting, and yeah, good call picking up on that. This is definitely something that we have seen over the course of Real Housewives of Orange County as a common theme.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think just being in like a sunny environment too, just to continue that for a second, is like also part of that kind of OC geography and themes thing, and in the sense that, like you mentioned, the early scenes where it is very exciting, we get like lots of B-roll cutaway to beaches and stuff like that. There's really that a sense of that. Well, everybody has like these dark, difficult things that they're dealing with under the surface. When you feel like you can just be like outside in the sun all the time, it's so easy to just be like Jen and just kind of ignore the whatever troublesome things are going on, and because you feel like there's a sense of like freedom and escape everywhere, and to switch from that to having to be indoors, and when like the rain forces everybody to go in, and then they have to like deal with each other, and the game kind of closes in on them in a net. It all really like sums it up really well.
Yeah, the rain looked so trapping. It looked so cold. It looked like such a long day. Like, I was like, it was like, when will it end? Even though I was enjoying it, because I was like, they look cold, which kind of like built to the tension of it.
Yeah, it made it feel more claustrophobic because they all had to huddle in under the bar to like stay out of the rain. They were like crouched underneath these umbrellas or in the veranda. Everything was like very crowded with, like we've mentioned in the OC, you're used to having a lot of space to play with. We're not used to seeing it so claustrophobic. And so, yeah, it was really interesting, the impact that had and the tension that it added for sure. Let's move into our quotes here. Carson, did you have a quote that stood out to you?
I'm happy that Heather has acknowledged. Let me start that over. I'm happy that Heather has acknowledged that Katie exists and breathes air. I feel like that's a step in the right direction. Just so funny to me, like, and I think, it was Emily. I think Emily has such funny confessionals. She really reminds me of like Paige DeSorbo, just in like wittiness. It's like, she's a self-aware housewife, which I don't typically like love. I kind of like when they're not self-aware. I kind of think it makes for like funnier, just like environments. But Emily, she's self-aware and uses it in the way that Paige does. And I love her as like the narrator sometimes of the OC, because I think she can kind of bridge both sides of the group a little bit sometimes, which I love. And I think her and Gina are having like a great moment on the OC overall.
Yeah, I agree. I am a Geniac, so I am like always here for Gina. I think that she's like a really underrated housewife in terms of how she like plays and manipulates situations. I think that she's just got such a knack for how to use information. So I'm a big fan of her. And I completely agree. And Emily is a fantastic housewife as well. I think that she's really stepping into her own. I have always been saying that I think that, when they got rid of Tamra and Vicki, that was a huge mistake because they're like great housewives. But one thing that it did was it allowed Gina and Emily to have more space to like evolve as housewives, and I think that they are way better for it. I'm glad they brought Tamra back. It's time to bring Vicki back full time. I think anytime she's on the screen, I'm reminded why like I miss her. So I was happy to see her return here.
I loved seeing Vicki in this episode. It like made it for me. It's so funny.
Yeah. And there was another person who I am a huge fan of that returned that I want to, maybe I'm jumping ahead to highlights here, but the return of Teddy cannot go unacknowledged. Teddy, my queen. I love her. I just love how Teddy is able to like trigger the entire fan base. Everyone hates her so much, and I think it's because she's just like so reactive and so effective. And just seeing how seriously she takes herself and how seriously she took this role, definitely giving up one of my highlights right now. But since we're talking about returns, I want to see the return of Teddy. We've just lost way more like listeners from my like pro Teddy rant than the soundboard will lose us, but I'm fine with that.
Lead into it, make some sounds.
I don't
have one sound. You just have one sound on the soundboard.
Wait, no. Here's a good one. There we go.
All right.
Dylan, did you have any quotes that stood out to you?
I mean, it comes back in the next episode, so it already gets highlighted, but I did really like how they're saying, in the spirit of inclusivity, I would like to invite you. It's just a hilarious way to invite somebody to a party by starting it off with in the spirit of inclusivity. Like, just like a three-legged dog or something. That's really good stuff for me.
Yeah, my quote is, it's very difficult for me to be stuck in the middle of this. When Tamra is referring to her position between Shannon and Alexis, like, she doesn't have to be in the middle of this. She has put herself in the middle of this. So I just really loved her, like, really making the situation about herself in that moment. One of the reasons that Tamra is an all-time great, the way that she's able to put herself in the middle of situations that she wouldn't otherwise be in and is able to cause chaos from that position. I love it. Let's talk about strategic decisions. Carson, is there any decisions that stood out to you from the Housewives in terms of how they might be playing the housewife game?
Yes. Let me find it here on my notes. I do think Heather has a strategy just in the inclusive, like inviting Katie. She's like, I want to be queen bee, but not villain. Heather does not like the villain edit. I was listening to Terry on... So you guys know how Tamra and Teddy have their podcast, and they have a million podcasts under them. I was listening to the Eds, the husbands.
Oh yeah.
And they had Terry on, and it was a long podcast, almost 2.5 hours. Probably a good hour of it almost was Terry talking about how they quit the show because of the edit, and they will quit again, and like their kind of like love for fame. And I think Heather really is very intentional throughout the season. Like, I will be the queen, I will be on top, but I won't be the villain, you know? I also think there's just like overall strategy from, I can't tell if it's like production or Bravo, but just to humanize Shannon, like as much as possible, to constantly humanize her and make her likable. And I don't think Shannon's gotten that before. Like, I've been watching some of the old seasons, like during her divorce with David. They gave her a really bad edit. And even in like following seasons when they would flash back to her like weight loss and gain constantly. So I do think there's strategy on that as well, of just like, let's make her as human and vulnerable, because she might break if not. If she got a bad edit, she might break.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, like you said, that's not something that Shannon normally gets. And this is coming off of her like doing something that is pretty abhorrent. So you would think if anyone is set up to get a bad edit, it would be Shannon. And I think that Alexis thinks that as well, because the way that she is acting, it's like she thinks that she is going to be getting the edit that Shannon is getting. Like, she is acting as though she is the hero that is coming in, that is standing up for the aggrieved party, Johnny J, and that she is this champion that's coming in, and she just comes across like so overconfident. She's trying to, like, even in some of the confessionals that we got earlier, when she's like, oh, what, you want fun Lexi to be coming to your parties. Like, she's trying to be fun Shannon, like Shannon's alter ego, the fun Shannon. She's really trying to step in and be Shannon. She thinks that she's going to be getting this edit that Shannon is getting. I love to see this, and it is so cringeworthy when she's like trying to, you know, lean into this and try to look like she is this hero or gain sympathy. Dylan, did you have any strategy that stood out to you?
I'm also interested in what Heather's doing, because I agree that I think that's kind of her mission to like not get a villain edit this time, and also just to not have everybody against her, which is kind of how the previous season ended, with like everybody against Heather. And I feel like her trying to cozy up to Alexis without it looking like taking a side is part of that. But I also and I'm curious where she's going with that, and I think we get a bit more of that in the next episode. But I do think we also see that with the way she's treating Katie, where she wants it to be very understood that Katie has committed a transgression, but instead of freezing her out, wants it to be seen.
I love the
we got Wes
soundboard.
Macaulay in the studio with us right here. But wants it to be seen as like I'm extending an olive branch when I don't have to. I do not have to accept Katie to this group at all, but I'm doing it because I am a queenly, kind, welcoming figure. In the spirit of inclusivity, I deign to do this, and that's just such a Heather thing to do, and I think that really speaks to her strategy of trying to, like you said, be kind of regal in the way that she approaches everybody else, so that she can't be accused of being a villainous, divisive figure.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Heather's approach this season is really interesting, and I think that Gina's reaction to it and her I feel like she is reading the fact that Heather is not wanting to be the villain and is needing to approach things with forgiveness, to use that space to kind of operate and maybe manipulate Katie a bit. Really, she's got a bit more play within the dynamic that she has with Heather, and how she can manufacture drama from that position. I think that she's using that wisely. So yeah, I think that is one strategic element that I'm really curious to see how this plays out, because she, we've talked about how the kayfabe of bringing on Katie has been that she's Gina's friend, and now Gina has to create distance so that she can create drama with Katie. I think she's doing a really great job of it, and she's kind of using the fact that Heather has to be forgiving and not be this person that is reactive in order to do that. And I think it's smart. Maybe I'm reading into a mastermind that isn't there, but that's my prerogative. That's my opinion.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
Keep on rolling, baby.
Let's get into our highlights. Carson, what are your highlights?
Wow. So, I mean, the push in the pool, I loved. I really, really loved. Overall, I really did love Emily, though, getting vulnerable about why Jen pisses her off and her, kind of deep diving into it. Another highlight I want to talk about is I think it's so interesting seeing Tamra's and her daughter's relationship for the first time. I mean, we saw her as a toddler on the show 15 years ago, but we really, really don't know her daughter. And you can see Tamra continuing to bring up the things that you can see that she's like, hey, Mom, don't talk about my sister. Don't talk about my dad. I'm uncomfortable. These are my boundaries. I get that feeling that conversation is had. And then Tamra keeps bringing it up. Or she'll get shut down by her daughter and really lay it down in the confessionals, which I'm like, again, that's breaking the boundaries. And I find it really triggering that Tamra calls her daughter, who's no contact with her, dead, having a dead child. It's a really interesting dynamic, though, to watch as a family, because it's also about adult relationships with children and how those evolve and change as these little beings become humans with their own thoughts.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that those are my highlights really of the episode, is seeing the relationships. And I also find it funny putting 18-year-olds together for a play date.
Yeah, totally. That's a good point about Tamra and her daughter, and it's something that I hadn't really considered, is the fact that a lot of these housewives, and I don't mean this in a malicious way, but their journeys as mothers are used in order to give audience sympathy to them, to endear them. Tamra has not really had the benefit of having that tool at her disposal to round her out as a housewife. And so seeing her having to do that with her adult children and, navigate things that way is interesting to watch, because sometimes it feels a little inauthentic, and I feel like that has a lot to do with just not being used to watching her in that role and not having a lot of context for how she interacts with her children, aside from, we've seen
Her
a
son.
lot more of Ryan than anyone else. And that he seems like maybe he's a bit more of a difficult child. I guess we've seen a little bit of Spencer in recent seasons as well, but it's definitely not something that she has had a lot of in her storylines in her time on the show. Dylan, what about you? What are your highlights?
I'm glad you brought up Emily doing a bit of soul searching, because I did enjoy that. I don't necessarily buy her self-analysis about being like, I have to be aggressive because I didn't have lunch money at school, but I like her opening up a little bit and try to dig into it. And I like that when she talks to Jen, she gives like a full no holds barred apology, like a no strings attached straight up apology, which is always refreshing to see, like an actual apology. And I thought it was a good episode for her.
Yeah, I think that they really got to kind of the crux of their issues, though. And not to say one is like that there's truth to either side, or like one side is like fully the correct read. But Emily thinking of herself as someone who has had to struggle for absolutely everything that she has, and like really had to try to, work for everything. Whereas Jen being this person that is having to never having to work or consider anything, is always being taken care of. So she's always being, pampered. I can see how Emily would, resent that, and how that would trigger her. And now seeing her, having to navigate and be more in this like disadvantaged position, she sees her as prey almost, and it's taking out a lot of the anger that she has about her own journey to where she got to on Jen. Mm-hmm. I think that we covered most of my highlights. Let's talk about our stars for this. Carson, do you want to get us started? Who are your stars?
My star for this episode is 100% Emily. I really just liked her at the party, and I think her and Gina, for me, like, they seemed like they actually have fun, which I like, and I think that kind of carries the drama throughout the episode. But yeah, I think I'm just really enjoying, like what you guys were saying, it's their season, I'm enjoying them, and I also was glad to have a break from Alexis this episode. So my 0 star.
Totally. Dylan, how about you?
My biggest negative in this episode was that Alexis wasn't there. Honestly, I find her hilarious, and I needed her back. My first star is also going to be Emily, though, if only for the image of her holding up a fistful of crickets. Second star to Teddy for like getting really into it and just running that show like the military. I don't know. I'll give a third star to Tamra. She's always funny, and it's great that she just ends up like just shivering under a blanket, looking dazed and confused for the final stretch of that insane, chaotic traders party.
Yeah, I agree with both of you about Alexis, actually. I think like it was good to get a break from her. She is really entertaining when she's on screen. I think that is like one of the more compelling things about this season. But when she's there and Shannon are there, they are a bit of a black hole. Like nothing else can really go on other than Shannon and Alexis. So it was nice that we got this event without her there. I think that my number 3 star is going to be Tamra. I think we had fun with her at the trader party. Like she was a good sport about being like tossed in the pool. We saw like a bit of a side to her that we haven't seen, so I liked that. I'll give number 2 to Emily for all the reasons that we talked about, and number 1 is going to be Teddy for sure. Let's go Queen Teddy. Okay, and if you don't like Teddy, you can cry about it.
Well, why don't you cry about it?
Okay.
I love the Teddy love. I love it. I'm from Indiana, so John Mellencamp is like Jesus where I'm from.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like everyone has a John Mellencamp story, and I love Teddy getting some love for once in the universe. She is probably, like, I don't know any housewife that gets more hate than her.
No,
like,
for sure. I don't think that there's any. Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to talk about the most recent episode of Real Housewives of Orange County right away. Before we do that, just want to take the opportunity to ask you all to please like and subscribe to our podcast wherever you're listening. Tell a friend. That helps us out a ton. Dylan, how is your hiatus? What have you been up to? Anything interesting?
So much. I've been fishing in the Keys. I've been married. I've been on Everest. I don't know. I feel like we were doing this yesterday. I don't know.
Interesting. That's the opposite for me. I feel like I have been driving my wife crazy with just like the amount of like projects, like half-baked projects that I'm doing, and having this as something to kind of like center my spare time around is going to be nice. My office is an absolute like chaos. I've started a project to reorganize it, and I got like halfway through that. I've been 3D printing the like craziest stuff. You can see in the background here, I've got this like logo that I put up for our podcast, and I don't know, I was making like puppets with the kids. I've got this this guy right here.
That guy's great. That guy should be hosting the show. You should just hold that in front of the mic and just speak through that. You're right. Yeah, that's the next co-host that we'll introduce, a wacky like puppet character. But I also was like, oh, I want to like make a new shirt to wear for the show, and so I like 3D printed this like stamp. I saw this YouTube video of this guy that 3D printed a stamp to like stamp T-shirts. I'm like, I'm gonna try that. I like basically ripped off the same design that he was using to test, and I printed it out, and I've got it here. Didn't have time to throw it on before, but it doesn't really. I love that you're doing prop comedy on a podcast.
Are you drunk?
Yeah, well, we get most of our views on YouTube, so if you're listening on an audio-only platform, go to our YouTube and check out this. It looks
what is going
like
on
the shirt
there? It looks like you just got stabbed in it. Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't really turn out that good. So
what is it supposed to be?
It's. Okay, so it is supposed to be like, you know those plastic bags that they used to have that had like, thank you on
Sure,
on it?
Yeah. They still have those.
Not here, they don't.
I probably got one
illegal
within reach. Oh, the plastic. Yeah, they've mostly changed them to like plant fibers or whatever.
So that's supposed to be what it is, but like
okay. That's actually kind of cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, the spray, like it dripped so much, it didn't like adhere to the stamp that I printed out at all. So it just like went everywhere. But yeah, so that's what I've been up to. I've been causing chaos around the house. I've basically been the Tamra of my household, just causing problems.
I'm sure your wife is so glad that we've restarted the show.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about the latest episode of Real Housewives of Orange County. Carson, do you want to give us a summary of this episode?
Yes. The women take a trip to Sonoma to come together. They attempt to keep Alexis and Shannon apart to keep peace, but the looming lawsuit from John Jansen disrupts the group. Shannon crumbles from anxiety of secrets resurfacing.
Excellent. Yeah, that's perfect. What stood out to you about how this was presented? This was definitely a contrast from the last episode about the traders.
But still very environmental, you know, like they're in now like Northern California. It feels very woodsy. Like it kind of, like my roommate came in, she was like, are you watching Big Little Lies? I was like, no, Real Housewives of Orange County. You know, it had that kind of feel to it. I also like really loved seeing them in the little cottages and stuff, because Housewives overall is a juxtaposition to like what a trad wife is, you know? And so kind of seeing them in that little like, oh, we're talking, like kind of making fun of it. I just really was like, oh, they don't see the juxtaposition, but I see it.
Yeah.
But, and I felt like this whole episode was about juxtaposition. You know, you have they're coming to find peace and they're like crumbling, you know, and like I talked about earlier at the end with Shannon and Heather, I think we see Shannon comes in with no makeup, you know, she's very, very vulnerable. She's in a robe. She's not dressed. She's just like kind of bursting out with vulnerability. And we see Heather very rigid and sit. Like if you even look at how Heather always sits, it's always like very lifted and stiff. And Shannon's like, she's such a mess. And I think it's about, these are what it is to be like a housewife in Orange County, you know, these two things.
Yeah, totally. Dylan, how about you? What stood out to you in terms of presentation here?
Yeah, I also really like the setting. The rain hasn't really gone away. It's kind of like a light drizzle, but we're still kind of under the rain. So that kind of feeling that there's a little bit like trapped by their anxieties and issues with each other is still kind of like dripping down, forcing them to not be able to spend too much time outside. But we're kind of settled into that, like you said, that woodsy environment, which I really like. The spa environment where like the need to like be taken care of and have people take care of you almost feels kind of oppressive. Like there's these people constantly hovering around being like, it's massage time, we gotta go. And I really like that. Like it's like somewhat relaxing, but there's also kind of like an oppression coming from the other sense, from that like that need that you have to relax now. You have no choice but to do it. And I feel like that's all kind of contributing to Shannon, as you say, being that kind of crumbling figure who looks so vulnerable and kind of at the end of her line there. It is a really interesting setting, and it's nice to have them out of Orange County for a little while there.
That's interesting that you kind of pick up on the oppressiveness of this like pampering as a theme here, because I didn't pick up on that, but now that you say that, totally. And I'm thinking about like one of the first scenes that we see in this episode is at the Dubrow's house, and they're talking about how they don't have the skills to like hang up a picture, and you know their kids like don't know how to swing a hammer or do laundry and that sort of thing. And you know that's just kind of an extension of you know how they operate through this world. So interesting that they chose to include that scene, because you know obviously there's some intention in highlighting this as a theme here. I love that.
Also, do you have to know how to hammer a nail? Because they're like, I don't know how to hammer a nail. What's there to know? Like there's two ends. I'm not a carpenter. Maybe it's much more like skill based than I thought. I mean, I've done it before when I need to, but it's like, you know, once you figure out which end you hit, and it's usually the flat one. Like what else do you need to know? How do you like where does like the advanced knowledge enter into that?
Well, Terry is a surgeon. Couldn't he figure it out?
Oh, but he can't damage his hands. Those are the money makers, right? So he doesn't want to risk like slamming his thumb or something.
Though I will say, you know what? Heather's like little packing hack where she's like, you put the tissue paper in, seems kind of presented as a ridiculous thing. I think that's kind of smart. That's not dumb. I think that's kind of an all right, because I can imagine how that, like she says, when you get something like from a store that provides just enough of a barrier that the crease isn't too hard. That's actually I usually pack the way that Shannon packs. Like I'm just on a tarmac trying to force a suitcase closed as all my clothes just fall out of it and in lumps. That's usually my strategy. So I was taking notes there. I was like, okay, that this is this and how to hammer a nail are two skills I apparently need to learn. I'm watching.
Well, I don't know how much validity there is to that. I feel like
sure
most of the like creasing that comes is from like trying to jam as much stuff into your carry-on bag or your suitcase as possible. You know, Heather doesn't get her clothes creased because she's flying private and she can like, you know, put as many suitcases as she wants. So
right, because she's not going to be the one handling them.
Yeah, I feel like it's more a result of that, but you know, whatever. If it works, we'll have to test that out, I guess. Dylan, when you're traveling after your season comes to an end,
we'll do a life hack spinoff where we'll test all these tricks.
Cool. Let's talk quotes. Carson, what stood out to you in terms of quotes?
We love and support them. We're not trying to hide them. We're not having them exploited. It's a dance. I like this side of Heather as well. It's like, you know, we don't see too much of their family. I mean, we do see them, but I like her kind of pointing out of like her experience as a parent being separate from her child's experience, you know? And I think OC overall, like, I know this is kind of pulling into strategy, but I think for a while, like in 2020, they kind of lost some viewership because it was the conservative show almost, you know, it was kind of outspokenly conservative. They weren't quiet about it. They were very loud about it. And I think there's been kind of a rebranding, like a soft, progressive rebranding. Like, yeah, it's conservative OC, but we're very progressive and we love queer people. I think that has been very, like, overall. And I think having Heather share her story, and even Alexis has not been shown to be, like, calm at all in anything. They showed her in this episode, like, talking about her child, and it gave her, like, some softness, you know? And I think it's just like, okay, these women might be terrible, but it's like you said, they're great mothers and they're supporting their trans children, you know, which I love to see as well. Cause I like the juxtaposition of that, you know, of like being in a place like the OC and being like a very supportive, like parent to your queer kids.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things that reality TV does great is the fact that you're able to show that people aren't like one-dimensional or two-dimensional like characters. There's nuance to them. It's not just, you know, this or that. You're not a good guy or a bad guy. So being able to show that there's kind of more nuance there, I think is, you know, it's nice to see.
Yeah, and if they are trying to make it pull like a little bit more liberal, I like that they're doing it in a very OC way by being like, we're going to the wine tasting session hosted by Jim Obergefell, the guy from the Supreme Court case. Like when he showed up, I was like, oh, that's the guy. It's like meeting like Roe or Snopes or the state of Missouri. It's like, it's the dude from the case.
Dylan, did you have any quotes that stuck out to you?
You know what? I don't think I really noted down any quotes, honestly. Oh, I did note down Gina saying that she wants a massage from the bottom up. Was she saying that she was constipated? Is that what she was saying? Or was that...
I think there was a flashback right before to her, like, falling. So I think it was something about her legs. But again, I thought
she was having stomach troubles of some kind because she seemed to be like cradling her stomach when she was saying that, and I was trying to decipher that. But I guess it wouldn't make sense. If she was constipated, she'd probably want a massage from the top down, like a tube of toothpaste. But I'm not sure. But otherwise, I don't really have any quotes noted. I don't think.
Yeah, I was actually no. I do have two down here. So when Emily was asked what her favorite scent was, she said tacos.
Oh, right, yeah. Classic.
You know, this got a laugh out of me. It felt like a little bit like calculated and pre-planned. Like she's like really like trying to go for something here. I know
that was like her tagline last season was like, "Oh, like tacos" or something.
Yeah, but it still got a laugh from me. So I like that.
It is
but
great
I also. Yeah.
I mean, that is the kind of thing, if I'm going to try to think of like one of the scents that like makes me most like feel happy, that's the kind of thing that would be high on the list, honestly.
Yeah. I also really enjoyed Gina's read on the red carpet debut, like the term red carpet debut. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
So funny. So funny, actually.
How about strategy? Carson, anything stand out to you in terms of the strategy?
I mean, Tamra's strategy of like, oh shit, I'm the villain. Let me like put Gina in there. Like, I think she finally clocked it because we're almost mid-season, right, with OC. I think she clocked it like, oh, there's no villain. It's me. Let me put Gina in the middle. And I also think Gina is, Tamra sees her as the weak link, even though she's not really anymore. She kind of, Tamra still views her as that like second season housewife. And I'm like, she's a lot more seasoned though. And I think it was just clear when she was like, you know, oh, I think it's all Gina's fault when they were all talking. So that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that you're right. That is like one of the most interesting things. And I'm curious about the motivation here as to whether or not Tamra, like you said, sees Gina as a weak link, or if she sees her as strong enough to withstand and like, you know, carry the ball here. Like if she sees Gina as not necessarily someone that is going to like maybe read the fact that she's getting put into the villain position, but at least be able to kind of like run with the conflict, because I feel like it seems she is handling this with a bit more like respect for Gina's ability to play the housewife game than she did with her conflict with Jen last season. Whereas, you know, with Jen last season, she really saw her as, you know, as meat for the grinder, and really like was just kind of bulldozing her and, you know, totally on the attack. Whereas with Gina here, it's kind of more about like slipping this in and trying to subtly move things. Like there's a more subtlety to it. So I wonder what her view of Gina is in terms of her like skill and ability to play this game. Dylan, how about you for strategy? What stood out to you?
Well, I feel like one of the obvious things is Gina pretending to slip up about mentioning the video thing. That was a funny bit of her very intentionally dropping it into conversation and being like, "Oh my God, did that just come out of my mouth? Did I just say the video thing? Now everybody's talking about it. I feel so bad about this thing that I planned to do." The way she did it was good though. It worked. Like not for a second was Shannon like, "How dare you?" Like Shannon completely was just accepted it as like, "Oh no, don't feel bad. This had to come out. I'm glad it came out." So it worked out well. And I also think for Shannon, even though she was like coming off as so vulnerable for this whole episode, she did show a bit of good strategic thinking near the end when she gets Heather aside and shows Heather this picture of her and tells her how she sent this very vulnerable picture to John right after the accident and never got a reply. The fact that, like I mentioned earlier, Heather seems to be kind of cautiously cozying up to Alexis. I think Shannon is very aware of that, and it's a good play of Shannon to maybe take advantage of the fact that Heather doesn't want to be a villain, to make a play for her sympathies. And I thought that was a smart move from Shannon to not just kind of roll over in that moment, but still like show that she has a strategic head about her, and try to claw back Heather from getting too close to Alexis by playing on her sympathies.
Yeah, totally. That's a good point. I think like I think we've mentioned this quite a bit, but like Shannon is not someone that comes across as particularly strategic. She's a fantastic housewife, but not for the reason that she's like a puppet master. She's, you know, very like a bull in a china shop, and is able to like just cause destruction in her wake and not really understand why. Yeah, so to see her like pull Heather aside, I think it was the right strategic choice. I don't think she's thinking strategy. I feel like she's like playing from the heart like she always does. But yeah, I think that is really interesting to see how this is going to play out in terms of the dynamic socially here. Let's get into our highlights. Carson, what highlights do you have?
Emily saying measurement. Like when I heard that, I found that to be so funny. And she was like, "It's an Ohio thing." And I was like, "No, it's not. No, it's not. It is not." Like I'm from, you know, the Midwest as well. I've never heard anyone say that. And I just want to back up to like Heather too, like packing, because I just think we got a lot of Heather's like overall personality, not just in like, yes, she packed with paper, but the way she wanted to talk about it, almost like it was an art form. I really was like, oh, this is who this woman is. And even if all her money went away, I still think she might be like this in her own way, you know?
Yeah, totally.
I think Heather, what she brings to OC is like, they don't have the uber rich, you know, on OC like we do on the other shows. You know, we don't get like we have on Beverly Hills or New Jersey with just like the extravagance, and her extravagance is almost so peculiar, which is more interesting to me.
Yeah, totally. She comes across as like way more eccentric in this cast, you know, because of the relative comparison in terms of their wealth than she would on something like Beverly Hills. So yeah, she definitely brings a lot there.
Do you guys, what's your opinions about her eventually, like if she were to move to Beverly Hills? Do you prefer her on OC? Would you like to see her with like the Beverly Hills women?
I think that she like brings more to the OC than she could on Beverly Hills. Yeah, like I said, just having her as, being heads and shoulders above where the rest of them are in terms of wealth. And I think that adds a lot of complexity here. Whereas, just like being more baseline in the Beverly Hills cast, I think it makes her a little less interesting. But that's a good question. What do you think?
I kind of would like to see her in Beverly Hills maybe eventually, because she is kind of more rigid and like conservative in a way, and it reminds me of like Adrienne Maloof, that type of like old money, in Beverly Hills. I think now, we'll see with this new season, but I do agree with you in other ways of like what she brings to OC is so unique, and it's like, among like Dorit and Kyle and Sutton, Heather's not rich, Right. She's just like, and I would like to see her though in both. And I like now that ever since the Ultimate Girls trips happened, it seems like they're more willing to do the crossovers, of like, we'll see Tamra, I would like to see Taylor back in OC. Like, I kind of think, I really liked that kind of missing place. And yeah, it is 2 hours apart. It's not far, OC and LA. So I like the crossover between.
Totally. What about you, Dylan?
I like having Heather there. I do like that there is like big wealth disparities. I think that's something that's an added value to me. I like that it becomes a theme, that there are people from different wealth stratas that have to interact, because then it becomes a subject that can't be ignored. So I like having somebody like Heather, who's clearly wealthier than everybody else, and also having somebody like Jen, who's just drowning in debts. I think that it becomes part of the storyline, and it's just another texture.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's talk highlights. Carson, you want to get us started with highlights?
Did we just do highlights?
Oh yeah, we did.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are you drunk?
Somebody's got to pay attention. You know what? Yeah, let's. You know what?
You're drunk.
Let me say this. I'm glad. Every time we see Ryan, I'm happy to see Ryan. Even if we get a little tiny bit of him, I find him really funny. I love that just in the tiny snippets we get, he's like showing up for a meeting with a lawyer wearing some ridiculous like bowling alley shirt over a long sleeve shirt. It's just reaffirming my opinion that this is a guy who's just like a permanent like 14-year-old, and which I think is why every time Jen talks to him, his reaction is always some version of, yeah, and we get to have sex. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
He's just, he's really funny. And even in small doses, I appreciate his presence. A weird guy. I also just, talking about like the whole wine tasting thing, I always enjoy the fiction of celebrities or pseudo celebrities, like crafting branded products, and just like the way that we're just supposed to pretend that they were like involved in the creation of a product, and that we're supposed to like believe the idea that Heather like somehow made these sparkling wines over the course of however long it takes to make a sparkling wine, a couple years or whatever, so that each flavor represents one of her children. Like, we're just supposed to believe that she was like somehow involved in it, and being like, are you using like, sherry barrels to age this? Because I think this should be like fresh oak barrels, or it's not going to taste like my kid. Like, I think that this is supposed to make sense somehow. It's always really fun to me. I like that silly game.
Yeah, totally. I one thing that we haven't touched on yet is the info drop of Shannon's like offhanded comment about John Jansen's shoes, which as soon as they get on the private plane, this comment that Shannon makes on her breath about John Jansen wearing shoes in this photo that's being posted with Alexis, that she bought these shoes, and she kind of mutters it, and immediately it blows up in the plane on her. Like, that's just so characteristic of how Shannon operates. Like, she's not thinking about things strategically, and she of course this is going to blow up. She probably didn't expect it to blow up immediately. I don't think she was thinking at all when she said it, but yeah, I love that.
Do you really think that's not at all strategic, though? Like, it is it is a piece of information that helps her, and by delivering it in that way, it makes it look like it just slipped out, rather than her being like, "Oh, this is me trying to kick back and get my side of the story out." She can, like, by muttering it out, she can have that information that helps her come out without it looking as though it was intentional on her part. There might be a little more strategic cogs working there than you think, I think.
That could be.
I also do like that we get, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have Emily recreating Shannon muttering.
Oh, yeah.
Doing like an
that imitation was so
of being like, she did it in a very Shannon way, being like, does a little recreation of how she mutters information. And then, of course, Tamra immediately being like, oh, wait, that information hasn't made it to the other side of the plane yet. Hey, guys! It's just making sure that everybody knows it.
Another highlight that I had was the transition that we had after the scene with the Dubrows, where we get the transition from Terry's face to the moon.
Yeah, just an iris in on Terry's face that dissolves into the moon. What? Who cooked up that? That was really funny.
I love that. I kept going back and replaying because it was so funny to me, because it was just so like, funny. You know.
Yeah, it was very like old Hollywood, and it felt like the editors, I don't know if they were calling out the fact that his like post-surgery face is very like man in the moon, or if it was like, you know, they're so wrapped up in like trying to be in this Hollywood game that's like old Hollywood. I don't know. It was the blend of all of it was just, it was just visually funny. It was like conceptually funny. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know if it made me think of old Hollywood, but it made me think of Aliens, where Cameron throws in a bizarre like crossfade between Sigourney Weaver's sleeping head and like the Earth. It was very similar to that to me.
Let's talk about our stars from this episode. Carson, who are your stars?
Shannon. Shannon's my number one. Shannon, her, like, whether she's intentional, strategic, all the stuff we talked about, she carries the episode. She's like vulnerable. She's messy. She's just like there. She's like soaking wet in her like emotions. And it really, really carries it for me. But number two would be Gina, because I think she's like coming in with the assist. Like her pretend not to drop, but she totally dropped it. Like she knows that it has to come out this episode. You know, it needs to move the story forward. But I also, you know, I like Tamra in this episode as well, because I thought she also, one step below Gina, was like throwing more assists and moving it forward in these two groups. Yeah. And it was in a way where Tamra sometimes feels, she always feels very produced to me. Like she's always thinking about like what's next. And you can see like all of the things coming off too much. This one felt a little less to do, and it was like, okay, like, I loved her yelling across the plane. Like, that was like, that's where I like you, Tamra. Like, that's where it's my favorite.
Yeah. I like just like the impatience of it. Like, this information's going to filter through soon. She's like, let's just do it now. Yeah. Let's get it done with.
Yeah. Dylan, how about you?
Mine's going to be very similar. I do have to give Shannon the first star. This was, I think, her episode, because it was just, her mopiness, her vulnerability, but her also managing information at the same time. She was really, really the focus here. So it's got to be her first star. It's her episode. I do think I probably have to give Gina the second star too, because kind of the same reasons you said. She is like the one who's managing information here. She's dealing also with the fact that she's been kind of slightly boxed out by Heather because of her relationship with Katie and ends up in the wrong end of the plane. But she's thinking about a lot of things here. I think she's trying to plan her way forward, and that's really interesting to watch too. Also interesting to watch her fashion choices this season. I feel like she's swapped out the denim from last season with metallic surfaces. She's very into dressing like a firefighter from space in the future this season. Not sure it works for me, but I like the boldness of it. And third star, I'll give it to Teach, the guy hosting the ranch. We didn't get too much of him, but Teach had good energy and a good name. So shout out to Teach.
Expertly portrayed by David Cross. It was fantastic.
David Cross? I was trying. Yeah, I could see that. I was thinking maybe like Richard Kind was kind of the guy who would play him. But a welcome present in any event.
Yeah.
Paul Giamatti could do that. He could do a great Teach.
Oh, yes.
He's got a Teach in him.
Yeah. I want to see Paul Giamatti make an appearance in the Housewives universe. That would be awesome. I think that you guys covered the stars for me. I think number one for Shannon. Carson, I love the way that you describe her as soaking wet in her feelings, because that's totally. Perfect description of what we got here. Like you needed to towel off after that. And Gina number two for sure. The way she's handling information. She's got a new dog. She's bandaging her situation with Travis by getting another dog to fill her house. I think that this is actually a pretty compelling storyline for Gina. We didn't see a lot of it here, just this new piece of information about getting a dog. But what she's going through with Travis, it does feel authentic. And I think like she's having to make hard decisions in this journey, like for what's best for her kids. And I mean, I'm a huge Gina fan, so love to see this. And then number three is also Teach. If you didn't bring him up, I needed to bring him up because he did have a really great on camera presence. I think that about does it. Do either of you guys have anything you want to go back on Orange County?
Yeah, I'm good.
Keep on rolling, baby.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Carson. Do you want to let everyone know about your podcast?
Yeah, so I have a weekly Bravo podcast. We have new episodes every Tuesday, but the last episode of the month is always book club. I read a memoir with my grandma who does not watch Bravo, and we talk about it. This month we're doing What Remains by Carol Ratswell. Really, really loving it. Some past ones we've done Craig's Pillow Talk. We've done Pursuit of Portia. So I always hype up those episodes because they're my favorite.
Dylan, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
You can find some of my writing about movies on Substack. My name's Dylan Ferguson. It's just under my name. Haven't really been active this summer, but I should be doing some stuff again pretty soon. Awesome.
I'm Craig Midwinter. You can just find us manning our social media accounts on Instagram and TikTok at Bravo Outsider. Be sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice, and tell your friends about us. That's the best way to get the word out if you're enjoying our discussion here. Leave a comment. We'll try to get back to you if we can. Until next week, keep on wifing.
Bring the red guy back. Bring the red guy back,
baby.
Let's get her. That's my new friend.